everyone, welcome to this chat today on data collection in the family home. I'm hoping to chat through with you guys a little bit around some of the options for collecting data, why it's really important, and how we can actually make it work with family life. So my name is Katie Lyon. I'm one of the PBS practitioners at PBS UK. I am a board certified behaviour analyst, but I think most importantly to this sort of discussion at least is that I'm actually a mum to 3 small children myself. So I'm really hoping that everything that we would sort of cover today and have a little chat about are things that are actually going to be feasible within a family environment, you know, because it's a juggle at the best of times. So I don't want to be recommending anything that is going to be unrealistic or add to the general stresses of life. So I think it's really important that we spend just a little bit of time looking at why is data collection so important? You know, why is Katie banging on about data collection? And I think the main purpose really from everybody's perspective involved in a process is that actually it allows us to test the effectiveness really of what we're doing. You know, if we've got the data collection in place from the start, then actually 6 months down the line, you know, subjectively we may feel something is getting better or worse, or anecdotally I might be able to sit here and say to you, yes, do you know what, my daughter is sleeping better at night now. But actually I haven't got any data on that. It makes it really hard to know, is it that my daughter's actually sleeping better? Is it that actually I've developed different coping mechanisms? Is it that, you know, it has improved, but actually we're still a long way off where we need to be? And so with the data, we can actually analyse and properly look at that and you know, properly evaluate the effectiveness of what we're doing. And it will give that accountability. You know, if I'm working with a family and we're doing the data collection and then a few months down the line, I can see that actually there haven't been significant improvements in this challenge, then actually what I'm suggesting isn't working and I need to go back and I need to start again and you know, look at what we're doing and look at how we can support and look at what strategies might be effective for that individual. I think from a family perspective as well, something that I would always recommend, if you are able to, when you go into meetings with professionals, whoever it might be, whether it's the GP, whether it's, you know, psychiatrists, whether it's social workers, whether it's external PBS practitioners, it can be really beneficial to have some of this data to take with you from the pure point of the fact that it will save you time. You know, often the first step in sort of dealing with challenging behaviour and looking at you know, what's needed here is observations and collecting data. And actually, if you can already come with some of that basic data collected, you almost skip a step and you'll jump to the next one where actually it'll be straight onto the observations things. Not necessarily every time, it depends on the quality of the data collected, but actually it can really support the sort of the progress and maintaining that progress. And it allows you to see then if things are really improving. Slight disclaimer, obviously, I do not know directly any of the individuals that you guys are with on a day-to-day basis, so I can't sit here and recommend specific tools for specific problems. However, what I'm hoping to do is sort of talk around a variety of different data collection methods that could hopefully be adapted and used for specific behaviours, depending on where the need is. You know, not every tool is right for every task, and I will be suggesting things here today that are not right for the behaviours of concern that you're managing and dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So this is more of a starting point to give you some ideas to kind of go back and discuss with your professional teams what might be needed. Something I will say quite a lot, and I can get a little bit soapboxy about, so I promise I'll try not to today, is that actually it's about good data and not just collecting data for data's sake. And this point is really, really important, especially when working closely with families, because I think actually we've all been in a situation where, you know, we're asked to collect all this data around this individual, and then when it actually comes to it, nothing is done with it. And the data just sits there in a beautifully labelled folder. What is the point? It's having no direct impact on the quality of life of the people we're working with. And in that case, there's simply no point in the data. So one thing I do try and get a little bit soapboxy about is that it's all about good data. It's about looking at the behaviour of concern and really thinking, what do I actually need to know about this behaviour? What's actually going to give me the information I need? That doesn't necessarily mean you have to write an essay and a nice little war and peace article every time the behaviour occurs. It can be simple tics, it can be very short anecdotes, but what's going to be best and what's going to work best with this particular individual to get that information that we need. Some considerations when we're looking at data collection within a family environment has got to be the feasibility. You know, family life is tough and it is a juggle, and there is stuff going on all the time. Doesn't matter if there's one child involved, doesn't matter if there's 15 children involved. You know, family life is busy. And actually there is no point as a professional externally, me coming in and saying, actually, I think we should do X, Y, Z, and those will take 20 minutes of time to fill out, and we need this information out of this report. It's not going to happen. And if it's not going to happen, it's no good to anybody. Yeah, it might be the gold standard of what would help, but actually the gold standard is only going to be useful if it's feasible to get that information in the first place, and it's feasible to use those strategies. There's simply no point. I try and very much stick to a little bit of a, I don't know what I'd call it, bit of a mantra, I suppose, of actually, if I wouldn't personally be comfortable or able to do it, I will not recommend it. And I try and use that day to day, because actually, you know, you've got to practice what you preach, right? And there have been times when I've tested data collection methods on my 3 children to try and see if it's actually, you know, what I'm asking here, is this feasible? Is this feasible when you're all trying to leave for school in the morning and you've got children with lost shoes and someone else on the toilet, and, you know, is this going to work for the family I'm working with? And I do find that really helps as well. So it's got to be feasible. The other really important aspect, actually, and consideration of data collection is the motivation. You know, many of the families that I've worked with, and I know that many people have worked with, actually have been asked to collect all sorts of data collections before. You know, you have reams of the stuff, reams of ABC charts and all these things that actually just sit in a folder and then nothing really happens with it. And what was the point? A lot of work has gone into that, a lot of collection, a lot of time spent by families and professionals, you know, if it's a school setting. And actually then nothing's done with that data. So what is the point? So you've got to think about, actually, what is the data I need here? How can I check the effectiveness of these strategies? And actually, you know, how can I keep this as concise and as relevant for the family as possible? And those are really, really important steps. And actually, if you're a family coming to sort of look, and as I said earlier, if you're looking to sort of start the process off, actually coming with some of these data collection methods where you've already looked yourself and be like, do you know what, this is the issue. This is exactly what the problem is here. You know, it's not a problem, actually, that my child is awake between 10 p.m. and 12 p.m. every day. Actually, for us, the bigger problem is that he's waking up his smaller sister, or he's, you know, walking around the house and helping himself to food. You know, when you actually look at the behaviour of focus, what the strategies change. So we need to know exactly what we're looking at. So some of the data collection methods that we're going to be going through today are around frequency recording, duration recording, and ABC reporting. Now, I'm sure that these are all familiar buzzwords, but I really would like to sort of drill into them and look at actually how can these help and how can they benefit the individuals we're supporting, and how can they help us monitor these behaviours that challenge and actually have a big difference. We're going to have a quick look first then at event recording, and this basically does exactly what it says on the tin. It is simply recording the number of events, the number of times something happens. So this is a really good option for those behaviours that are very sort of defined in what they are. So they have a very clear start and a very clear finish. Things like, say, hitting behaviour. If it's at a sort of low frequency, you could do event recording. You know, behaviours that are very clear when they have and have not happened. Obviously, one of the drawbacks with event recording is that it doesn't tell us a huge amount around the behaviour. We're literally going to find out how often it happens. Sometimes that is a really, really good starting point. So if you're not able to do other forms of data collection, you know, there is nothing wrong with starting with event recording at all. However, some of the ones we're going to go into a little bit more detail in a minute will probably give us a little bit more sort of body and a little bit more information for those people that are sort of trying to help to support. So if you look at this table then, this is just a nice clear example of how you could set up your tally recording. So you could literally have your date, tallies for how many times XYZ happens, and then your total at the end. What does tell us a little bit more, and will be really beneficial 9 times out of 10, is to actually divide the day up by time interval. So here you can see in this next example is that actually down the second column there, the time column, I've broken the day into hour intervals. And that might go all through the day. It might be that 10 o'clock he goes off to school, and actually then I continue the recording when he comes home. But that will allow us to just that little bit of setup. The actual effort from our part isn't any higher than just doing tally recording, because we're still just doing a line every time it happens. However, it gives that little bit more information. So it just gives that little bit more of a picture of what's happening. Is it that actually this behaviour always happens first thing in the morning and then sort of peters out during the day? Could it be that actually it fluctuates and there are key times of the day where you're seeing a lot more of this behaviour? So by not adding any more effort on the part of me as a family member having to collect data, I'm managing to double the information I'm getting. I hope that makes sense. So event recording can be a really, really good starting place for data collection. How I would recommend setting this up is it doesn't need to be beautiful and fancy. It can just be a piece of A4 paper, time down the left-hand column, tally in the middle, and then total at the end. You don't even need to total it yourself. It could literally just be time and tally. Obviously, the examples that I'm giving here are all very clean-cut examples, nicely colour-coded. Data doesn't have to be pretty. It needs to be effective, and it needs to be a good tool to tell us what's happening. So do not worry about, taking times to print out beautiful charts. So long as it is clear what the data refers to and what is meaning, that is the most important point. Obviously, event recording is not going to be a beneficial option for all sort of behaviours. So if you think more about behaviours such as waking in the night, for instance, or time spent on social media, and those sort of behaviours that don't have a sort of a very concrete edge, they don't happen and then stop, they could go on for prolonged periods. Often actually duration is going to tell us more about that than simply how many times it's happening. If I were to do event recording for my daughter waking up in the night, actually that wouldn't necessarily tell us a huge amount. I could tell you that, she woke up 15 times last night, and then she woke up 3 times the night before. On the surface of that, it would look like last night with the 15 wake-ups was a significantly worse night, right? But actually what's missing is the information that actually, she woke up 15 times last night, but it was for about 2 or 3 minutes each time. The 3 times she woke up the night before, she was awake for 4 hours. It changes how we view that behaviour, and actually having that little bit of additional information makes a huge difference. So if you can look at the sort of the example duration recording, and again, very clean example, doesn't have to be this pretty, just get it written down. You've just got your dates, your start times and your finish times, and then the duration of what you're looking at there. I think when we talk about data collection and measurement in particular, we often think that actually, it's got to be something that is additional, it's going to be a lot of work, it's going to be a lot of extra effort on our part. However, as human beings, we measure all the time without necessarily really knowing what we're doing or processing it. I will wake up in the morning and look at my clock to see what the time is, to work out, actually, do you know what? I had an extra half an hour sleep last night. It's a good night. Or I'm driving my car and I'm looking at the speedometer to measure my speed. Or even in the morning, I'm making my cup of coffee and I'm putting in 2 spoonfuls of coffee, spoonful of sugar. I'll be bouncing off the walls. Hopefully I wouldn't have that much. But, you're measuring things all the time. So actually that behaviour in itself isn't something that has to adapt a huge amount to fit around family life, because we will be doing that regularly. The bit that is the additional task, and the bit that is the part that does have to require some effort on our part, if you like, to fit around family life, is simply the reporting of it. It's the writing it down. We will be very, very aware of whether my daughter was awake for 10 minutes last night or whether she was awake for 3.5 hours. What I've got to remember is that actually in 3 weeks' time, I won't remember that. so I need to have it written down. And it is that recording element that really makes the difference. So when we are looking at duration reporting, again, it's about the writing of it down, because you can't be expected to remember everything that's happened. You know, you will have gone into appointments with your GP, and they'll ask about symptoms of X, Y, Z. And actually on the spot, when you're trying to remember, when you're dealing with everything anyway, it's really hard sometimes to recall that information accurately, you know? So actually having that written down, you can be like, right, do you know what? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but here it is. So finally then, I just want to spend a little bit of time looking at ABC reporting. Now, there are two slightly different ways of looking at this, and I think ABCs has the ability to instill fear in people when they're told they have to do it, because it sounds like a real laborious process, but it doesn't have to be. So when we're talking about ABC reporting, ABC, A stands for your antecedent. That is essentially what was happening beforehand. You know, before the behaviour of focus, whether it be hitting or waking up in the night, what was happening immediately prior to that. Your B is then the behaviour. So exactly what was the behaviour, what happened, and what did it look like? And C is your consequence. This is a really misleading use of the term consequence, so I want you almost to forget that terminology completely. So when we're talking about consequence, we're literally just meaning what happened afterwards. It doesn't have to be, you know, a sort of a consequence as we would traditionally look at it, like a reprimand or something like that. I'm literally talking about what happened immediately afterwards. What was the response from those around the individual or from the individual themselves? So if you look at a couple of examples here then, so first of all, you've got anecdotal ABC reporting. So with this method, this is probably the sort of slightly more intense process of the two. It will involve you jotting down just a few notes whenever something happens. So I would not recommend this process for behaviours that are happening really, really regularly, because actually if you're having to do this every 2.5 minutes, well, it simply wouldn't work. You won't do it. So the ABC reporting of an anecdotal sort of side, I would use for those behaviours that you're seeing slightly less frequently. That will give you time to report it in between. But you can see from these examples, you know, Kay was playing in the living room, B walked in and tried to take the car that Kay was playing with. So that is immediately what was happening. So your antecedent, immediately before the situation occurred, Kay was playing in the living room and B walked in. The behaviour itself was that Kay screamed very loudly and hit B on the shoulder with a closed fist. So again, trying to be very specific about what that behaviour looked like. The result then of what happened straight after the behaviour was that actually B left the living room and Kay returned to the car game. And that was it, situation complete. So you can see it's just giving it that little bit more information. And one of the real benefits of ABC reporting is that actually it can allow us to start to see some patterns. You know, because if I looked at that first incident and just thought, okay, so Kay was playing, hit B, there was no reason for that. But actually then you start to unpick it a little bit and you start to record down that actually, you know, there are things happening around this behaviour. There are contingencies in place. They can be really, really hard to spot. So sometimes writing them down and actually getting another pair of eyes can be really beneficial. The other example there then, you know, Kay was sitting and watching TV, B was on the opposite sofa watching TV, and there was no interaction between the two of them. I sometimes have teams sort of come back to me and be like, oh, well, there was no antecedent. Nothing happened before this behaviour. That's not physically possible. So the person presumably existed before that behaviour. So even if it's that individual was spending time by themselves in the bedroom, or they were playing on the swing completely by themselves, or they were playing a game with a sibling and having the best time, you know, even if it's not something that to us is obviously a trigger for an incident of challenging behaviour, something happened. So just reporting down that actually, do you know what, like this example, it wasn't obvious. Kay was sitting watching TV, B was opposite watching TV, no interaction. Suddenly there was a behaviour of screaming and throwing cushions. So it's really important to try and get as much of that information down as possible. The other type of ABC reporting then is your checklist ABC. Now, before I bring it up, I want to warn you that this initially looks a little bit overwhelming. Like there's a lot of information on this page. It's really a very beautiful tool and it's nice and simple to use, I promise. So if you have a look at this one, then this is the put my teeth back in, tick list ABC, checklist ABC. And simply with this behaviour, so if you've got a behaviour of focus that is happening more frequently, and actually you're realistically not going to have the time to write the detail of the anecdotal ABCs, this is just a tick. So you've got your columns there. You've got your column on the left, which is your location. So that sort of feeds into the antecedent as well. So that what's happening beforehand, where was the individual? What happened immediately beforehand? All those examples that are at the top there where it says, possible pain, alone in room, instruction given, can all be completely edited. So you can put up there exactly what makes sense for the individual you're working with. So it can be things that you've seen or been a little bit suspicious that actually maybe that's having a bit of an impact here. You can list them there and literally just then tick which ones are relevant for that situation. And you've got many rows, so within one day you can have them all on the same piece of paper. If something happens that is not in your listed examples there, if you can see, you've got the other column, which it says write in notes. So you can tick that one, and then at the bottom, when there is a space for notes, you could be putting in, actually, it was XYZ this time, just in brief notes. So it's really beneficial for those behaviours that are happening more frequently and you don't have time to get the detail, because you'll still be able to draw patterns from this. You'll still be able to look at this and start to understand a little bit of the sort of variables around the behaviour that might be impacting on it, and sort of maintaining that behaviour as well. What is working to keep this behaviour going? So that could be a really, really handy tool there, the checklist ABC. So this has been a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the data collection options available that hopefully will be a little bit more feasible within the family home. I really, really hope you have found today useful, and to some degree I'm planning to attend the session on the 3rd of August. So if anybody does have any questions or anything that they would like to discuss further, or just something they'd like me to clarify, I would be more than happy to chat to anybody then, and it would be lovely to meet some of you virtually. But yes, I hope you found today helpful, and I look forward to seeing you. Cheers, bye.